There comes a moment in every life when the mirror no longer shows a face you recognize. You look into your own reflection and realize that somewhere along the way, pieces of you have been lost, buried beneath expectations, disappointments, and roles you were never meant to play. You sense a quiet ache inside, a whisper that says, "This is not who I truly am." It is in that whisper that the journey begins, not the journey of becoming someone new, but of remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. Rebuilding yourself is not about chasing perfection or escaping the past. It is about walking back into the ruins of your own soul and finding the light that never went out. It is about facing the parts of yourself you've denied, the emotions you've suppressed, and the truths you've feared. Most people spend their lives constructing walls to protect themselves from pain, not realizing those same walls also block out meaning. To rebuild yourself is to tear those walls down, to step into the unknown, not to find a new identity, but to rediscover your own. And that is where real freedom begins, deep within the fragments of your forgotten self. Rebuilding yourself begins with a confrontation that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. It is not the confrontation with the world, nor with those who wronged you, but with the silent presence within, the shadow you carry in the depths of your being. Every person wears a mask to survive in the light of day, a persona shaped by expectations, fears, and the desire to belong. Yet behind that mask lies another self, unseen and often unwelcome, containing everything you reject or repress about yourself. The qualities you condemn in others, the emotions you push away, the impulses you label as weakness or sin. They all live there, waiting for you to turn around and face them. This confrontation is the beginning of true rebuilding, because no structure can stand if it is built upon denial. The shadow is not your enemy, it is the part of you that demands recognition. It appears in your dreams as figures you cannot control, in your thoughts as urges you pretend not to have, and in your life as patterns that repeat no matter how hard you try to change. You cannot escape it by positive thinking, prayer, or distraction. You must acknowledge it, speak with it, and learn what it wants from you. Often it does not seek to destroy you, it seeks integration. It asks to be seen, understood, and given a voice. The anger you suppress becomes resentment, the sadness you deny becomes emptiness, the envy you hide becomes self-loathing. When these hidden emotions rule you unconsciously, you live as their prisoner. But when you bring them into awareness, you reclaim your power. Facing the shadow is not an act of shame, but of courage. It means standing before your own darkness without flinching. It means admitting that you are capable of cruelty, jealousy, pride, and fear just as much as you are capable of kindness, love, and compassion. To rebuild yourself, you must allow yourself to be whole. Wholeness is not purity, it is honesty. When you deny your darker nature, you divide yourself in two, the part you show to the world and the part that operates beneath it. But when you embrace both, you begin to move as one integrated being. You stop pretending to be light and start understanding that light only exists because of shadow. This confrontation often begins with pain. The first glimpse of the shadow can be unbearable. It feels like a betrayal of your own image, as if everything you believed about yourself has been shattered. You may feel disgust, fear, or even despair, but what feels like destruction is actually revelation. The pain you feel is the tension between who you are and who you've been pretending to be. The moment you stop fighting it, the transformation begins. You start to see that your shadow holds your strength, creativity, and authenticity. The traits you once despised contain the raw material of your individuality. Your anger can become assertiveness, your envy can become inspiration, your fear can become awareness. The very things you thought made you broken are the keys to your wholeness. In the process of rebuilding, you will discover that the outer world mirrors your inner one. The people who frustrate you, the conflicts that drain you, and the circumstances that challenge you are reflections of your internal divisions. Every projection you place on others is a message from your unconscious, urging you to look inward. When you find yourself judging someone harshly, ask what part of you they represent. When you feel irrationally defensive or offended, ask what fear they have touched within you. In this way, every encounter becomes a tool for growth. The world becomes your mirror, revealing the shape of your own shadow. To rebuild yourself, you must stop blaming the mirror and start examining the reflection. Reconciliation with the shadow does not happen overnight. It is a slow, ongoing dialogue with yourself. You will resist it at times, fall back into denial, and project your darkness onto others. But each time you bring awareness to it, the shadow loses its grip. What once terrified you becomes familiar. What once controlled you becomes understood. Through this process, you learn compassion, not only for others but for yourself. You begin to see that the human soul is vast enough to contain both sinner and saint, weakness and wisdom, chaos and order. The act of rebuilding is not about erasing the past or cleansing the self of imperfection. It is about integrating all the fragments into a single, living truth. The greatest misunderstanding about self-improvement is that it means polishing away what is ugly until only the beautiful remains. But that is an illusion. To rebuild yourself is to enter the ruins of your own psyche and recover the pieces that were buried there. You will find there the rage you were taught to hide, the grief you were told to ignore, the instincts you were shamed for having. They are not your flaws, they are your foundation. The person who denies their shadow is fragile, easily shattered by failure or rejection, but the one who has embraced their darkness walks with quiet strength, because they no longer fear what lies within. They have seen their own abyss and learned that it does not consume them. It transforms them. In the depths of that encounter, you may realize that what you feared was never the darkness itself, but the loss of control. You feared becoming what you judged, feared admitting that you too are human in the fullest sense, capable of error, contradiction and change. Yet in that admission lies liberation. You cannot rebuild yourself by clinging to an idealized image. You rebuild by allowing yourself to be real. Only when you accept every aspect of your nature can you rise from the fragments with integrity. To confront the shadow is to choose truth over comfort, evolution over stagnation, and authenticity over illusion. It is the quiet act of turning inward, seeing yourself as you truly are, and beginning, at last, to rebuild from there. To rebuild yourself, you must first allow a part of you to die. This truth is difficult for most to accept because the ego clings desperately to what is familiar, even when that familiarity brings suffering. The old self is not just a collection of habits and memories, it is an identity, a narrative you've told yourself for years about who you are, what you deserve, and what life means. Letting it dissolve feels like stepping into the void. Yet every transformation begins with that death, the symbolic collapse of the person you once were. Without it, there can be no rebirth. The life you are meant to live cannot exist atop the ruins of the life you're afraid to leave behind. The death of the old self rarely happens by choice. More often, it is forced upon you through crisis, through loss, heartbreak, failure, or disillusionment. The events that shatter your certainty are not punishments but invitations. They strip away everything superficial so that the deeper layers of your being can emerge. When the structures you trusted fall apart, you face the terrifying question, who am I now? In that silence between what was and what will be, lies the opportunity for renewal. Most run from it. They try to rebuild the same structure with slightly different materials, repeating the same patterns under a new name. But the few who dare to stay in that emptiness long enough to listen begin to understand that the death of the old is not the end. It is the necessary clearing for something real to grow. The old self resists death. It whispers that without your past identity, you will disappear. It reminds you of your achievements, your roles, your masks, and tells you they define your worth. You cling to them because they provide stability in a chaotic world. Yet, in truth, they imprison you. You cannot grow while remaining loyal to who you once were. Growth demands betrayal, not of your values, but of your old limitations. You must be willing to disappoint the version of yourself that settled for less, that lived for approval, that feared rejection. The moment you stop identifying with that old image, you enter the unknown. It feels like chaos, but in that chaos lies the raw material of creation. To allow the old self to die is to surrender control. It means admitting that the way you've been living no longer works. It means facing the emptiness without rushing to fill it. Most people run from that emptiness because it feels like failure, but it is actually potential in disguise. When you stop pretending to know who you are, you create space for something deeper to emerge. The stillness that follows the collapse is not lifeless. It is fertile. It is the soil in which the seeds of your true nature can take root. In that silence, a voice begins to whisper, faint at first, from somewhere beyond your ego. It does not shout or command, it invites. It calls you toward authenticity, toward becoming who you were meant to be, not who you were taught to be. The death of the old self is not a single event. It is a process that unfolds in layers. You may feel moments of clarity followed by confusion, liberation followed by grief. That is natural, for every death carries mourning. You mourn not just what you lost, but who you were within that loss. Yet grief is a sacred teacher. It teaches you to release with grace. It teaches you that what is gone does not need to be reclaimed. Every tear shed for the old self is an act of purification, washing away illusions that no longer serve your evolution. Eventually, the grief gives way to acceptance, and acceptance becomes peace. In this process, solitude becomes essential. The old self is sustained by noise, by distraction, by validation, by constant movement. But the new self is born in quiet. It emerges when you withdraw from the world long enough to hear your own soul. Solitude does not mean isolation. It means intimacy with yourself. When you stop seeking external mirrors, you begin to see your reflection within. The thoughts that once frightened you start revealing their meaning. The emptiness becomes a companion rather than an enemy, and slowly, you realize that the death you feared was never real death. It was transformation. What perished was the false image. What remains is essence. In that moment of inner death, time feels suspended. You no longer rush toward goals or cling to identities. You exist in a liminal space between endings and beginnings, between what was and what might be. It is a sacred threshold. Many turn back here because the uncertainty is too heavy, but those who cross it awaken to a profound truth. The destruction of illusion is the birth of consciousness. When the false self dissolves, your perception changes. You begin to see life not as a series of tasks or roles, but as an unfolding journey of awareness. The boundaries between you and the world soften. You start to sense the interconnectedness of all things, the quiet rhythm that pulses through every experience. The death of the old self reveals the unity beneath separation. As you move through this transformation, the world around you begins to reflect it. Relationships shift, desires evolve, and priorities reorder themselves. What once mattered no longer does, and what you once ignored begins to glow with meaning. This is not because the world changed, but because your eyes have. The lens through which you viewed reality has been cleansed by loss and self-confrontation. You are no longer acting out of compulsion or fear, you are responding from awareness. That awareness is the first breath of the new self. It does not shout, it does not strive, it simply is. It moves quietly, grounded in truth rather than performance. Rebuilding yourself after such an inner death does not mean returning to who you were before. It means carrying the wisdom of what died within you into the new life that is forming. The fragments of the old self become the foundation stones of the new one, but now they are placed with consciousness, not habit. You begin to live deliberately, not reactively. Every choice becomes an act of alignment with your evolving truth. And though you may appear the same on the outside, inside you are no longer ruled by the ghosts of your past identities. You have walked through the fire of dissolution and discovered that what is real cannot burn in the end. The death of the old self is the price of awakening. It is the necessary surrender that allows you to rebuild not from fear but from truth. It demands courage, patience, and faith in the unseen process of your own becoming. You cannot hold on to who you were and expect to evolve. You must allow the old self to crumble, to return to dust, so that the essence of who you truly are can rise from within that silence, whole, unbound, and newly alive. You cannot rebuild yourself while remaining on the surface of your life. The surface is where you wear your mask, where you play your roles, where you say the right words and pretend to understand who you are. But beneath that surface lies an ocean, the unconscious, and until you are willing to dive into it, you will continue to live half awake. The descent into the unconscious is not a comfortable journey. It is not about self-improvement or positive affirmations. It is about meeting the depths of your psyche, the memories you've buried, the emotions you've repressed, and the truths you've avoided. It is a journey inward, toward the place where all your wounds, fears, and desires reside. Only there can the real rebuilding begin. The unconscious is not an abstract idea. It is alive within you, shaping your behavior, your relationships, and your destiny without your awareness. Every reaction you can't explain, every fear that seems irrational, every pattern that keeps repeating no matter how hard you try to change, it all originates there. The mind hides what it cannot face, but what it hides does not disappear. It waits. It influences from the shadows, pulling the strings of your choices, guiding you toward situations that mirror your inner conflicts. This is why life often feels cyclical, as if you are reliving the same pain in different forms. The unconscious seeks expression. It will bring to your path whatever is necessary to make you see what you have refused to see. The descent is the act of finally looking directly into that mirror. To descend into the unconscious, you must be willing to let go of certainty. The rational mind cannot control this process, it can only observe. Logic, for all its strength, cannot navigate the terrain of dreams, symbols, and intuition. The language of the unconscious is not words but images and feelings. It speaks through your imagination, your instincts, and your inner unrest. This is why your dreams often feel strange or fragmented. They are messages from your deeper self trying to communicate through symbols your conscious mind can barely grasp. To rebuild yourself, you must learn to listen to this language. You must interpret your emotional responses not as obstacles, but as signposts guiding you to what requires healing. The descent begins when you stop running from discomfort. Most people avoid silence because silence reveals what is hidden. When you sit in stillness long enough, thoughts arise that you've long suppressed. Memories resurface. You feel emotions that have no immediate cause but carry an ancient weight. This is the voice of the unconscious asking to be heard. At first, it feels overwhelming, even threatening. You may feel like you're losing control, like you're being pulled into darkness. But what you are truly losing is illusion. The descent strips away everything false so that only truth remains. The darkness is not evil, it is the absence of awareness. The moment you bring your attention to it, it begins to transform. This process cannot be forced. It unfolds in rhythm with your willingness to face yourself. The unconscious reveals itself in layers, as if testing your readiness. At first, it may show you mild discomforts, old memories, small regrets, subtle fears. But the deeper you go, the more profound the revelations become. You begin to uncover the core beliefs that have governed your entire life, the wounds from childhood that shaped your perception of love, the hidden shame that sabotages your confidence, the unacknowledged anger that fuels your restlessness. Each layer you uncover asks for acceptance, not judgment. You are not descending to condemn yourself, you are descending to understand yourself, and in understanding you reclaim what was lost. The descent is not only about pain, it is also about discovery. Beneath the chaos of the unconscious lies immense power. Your creativity, intuition, and resilience live there. The parts of you that feel broken often conceal hidden strength. When you face your fears, they lose their ability to control you. When you confront your sadness, it transforms into compassion. When you acknowledge your anger, it becomes courage. Every emotion, no matter how dark, carries energy that can be transmuted into light once it is integrated. The descent is not about drowning in the darkness, but diving deep enough to retrieve the light buried within it. Many avoid this journey because they mistake their unconscious for their enemy. They think that to look inward is to risk madness. But it is repression, not exploration, that drives people to despair. What remains unexamined grows in power. What is faced loses its threat. The unconscious is not chaos waiting to consume you. It is wisdom waiting to be heard. It contains the map of your healing, the patterns of your suffering, and the blueprint of your purpose. The descent teaches you humility, for it reminds you that you are far more complex than you appear. It teaches you patience, for nothing within you reveals itself on demand. And it teaches you courage, for the greatest battles you will ever fight are within your own soul. The world often fears those who have faced their own depths because they cannot be easily controlled. When you descend and return, you no longer live by superficial values or external validation. You see through appearances. You recognize the pain behind others' masks because you have faced your own. This new awareness changes the way you move through life. You begin to respond instead of react. You choose understanding over judgment. You no longer chase happiness, you cultivate meaning. You realize that the descent was never about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you truly are beneath the layers of conditioning and fear. As you navigate this inner landscape, you begin to see that the descent and ascent are one movement. Every time you dive into your depths, you rise with new understanding. Every time you embrace a part of